By asking the traditional question, is there someone present who doesn't speak Finnish? Great, thank you. It's looking better and better. Every year there are more people. First time I asked no one. Second time, one. Okay, may I actually ask you to get closer? There's a lot of space.
But not here, right?
You can even come there if you like. It's just making your life easier. You don't have to shout so much. If you want to ask a question, I really want you to ask a question, so please come closer if it's not a problem. Like I there already indicated, I would like this to be more of a discussion where I probably do most of the talking, but still a discussion. I would like you to ask questions, especially questions about your real life situations. If you had a problem, ask help for that, or maybe tell how you solve the problem. If you have any comments, please also feel free to talk, but because there's still quite a few of you, raise your hand if you want to say something, and then I will give you the spotlight. So today's topic is basically some tricks that I have learned over the 15-ish years that I've been role-playing about how to enhance my sessions and nowadays especially even individual scenes. Understand a little bit of the structure of the scenes. My background is that I started role-playing using D&D 3.5, like quite a lot of people. And from the beginning I didn't like it, so I tried to fix it. And then about maybe 2 years later, I found out that actually there are a lot of different systems out there and they're easily available. So instead of trying to fix D&D, I started using other systems. And I tried maybe 30 different systems, and I'm regularly using maybe 3 to 5. So a lot of what I'm talking to here is about just what I've learned from using a lot of different systems. Because different systems can have a very different approach to the whole concept of role-playing. And it's important because role-playing is a bit weird. It's not like chess, for example. If you go and play chess, everyone knows what it means. It has very clear and strict rules, and it has a very clear and strict purpose. So anyone who has ever played chess, they know what you mean by playing chess. But if you tell them, let's go and role play, they don't actually know what you mean. Because role play is not one thing, it's a bundle of many, many, many different things. And you always get to choose how you focus in what part. And you can drop some of them off completely. You can even bring something new to the table. And even though it's more than 50-year-old hobby, it's still developing fast all the time. Every few years, there's a new thing going on. So I think it's very useful for people to stop to think what they're doing when they role play, what they want to be doing, what are their goals, what they want from that hobby, what they want from that campaign, that session, and why. And then just go and branch out. Try different things, try different groups, try different systems, different settings, and see what this hobby has to offer, because it will surprise you many times. Here's my agenda. There is one of these, and it's not the introduction, one of these topics which, if you're gonna remember one thing from today, I would really like you to remember that and apply it in your games. Any guesses which of these that would be?
Aligning expectations.
Why?
So that everybody knows what they're playing.
Yes. Like I spoiled that with my introduction. Like I said, role-playing is not one thing. And different gaming groups can really focus on completely different aspects of role-playing. And none of those is right or wrong, but they don't usually match very well. You can't have simultaneously someone trying to just focus on role-playing their characters and experiencing the scenes and the kind of the narrative from their character point of view, and someone else seeing it as basically a board game with very strict rules and a goal to win. Those two, they just don't work together. But neither is right or wrong. But this is not only just about this kind of game mechanical point of view, where you need to really align the expectations. You should also consider, at minimum, the genre, style, and focus. So genre can be, for example, high fantasy or modern world, or anime or Pokemon, or any kind of, this kind of like a trope that you're looking for. Again, it doesn't help that someone comes to play sci-fi, another one comes to play the modern world realistic game, and another comes there to play Lord of the Rings. You can't make that happen simultaneously. The style, someone comes there for a very realistic experience, horror, or someone comes there very heroic action. Again, whatever you kind of have on the table, you have to make the choice. And whatever you choose, if everyone isn't aligned to having that kind of expectation, they will be disappointed. And that's the weird part about people. Usually the strongest negative emotion we have is when we are disappointed. It's not necessary that things are bad, but we just were disappointed how they are. And disappointment comes from that something doesn't align with our expectations. I had an example of this. Basically, when I really realized how powerful this is there was a review of a game, and that review was very negative. And then he highlighted like what he didn't like about the game, why it's bad. And those were not really quality questions or quality topics. They were just what kind of game it was. It was an asynchronous game. He didn't like an asynchronous game, for example. I asked this person, did you read or write a single review before you bought the game? No. Why did you expect it to be not asynchronous? Why did you expect it to not have a grid? Why did you expect? Where did these expectations come from? And he didn't have an answer, and then he said, that's a good point, next time I will do that. But he had created a lot of expectation for the game without knowing anything about it. He had seen a picture, and that was enough to create expectations, and when he started to play, those expectations were not met, and he felt disappointed. It's a bad game, even though in its own genre, it was a very good game. And then, of course, if you have some special expectations, if you are looking for something very specific, like I've had a campaign where I on purpose wanted to kind of like make the people, including myself, the players, to think about kind of like the religion, what kind of effect religion has, and what kind of how religion is actually constructed, and how can it influence people and the world. There's a very specific thing. So I needed to make sure that they understand, more or less, that we're going to have this kind of topic, and it's very strongly present in the campaign. So what do you do if you don't have alignment? You realize that you're not aligned. You talk about it in advance, for example. That's the best. So what I would do is that align expectations before session 0 even. Because in session 0, you're already doing something. You're creating together. If you come to that with different expectations, you're going to fail. So do it before session 0 even. But if you didn't do, you're already on a campaign and you didn't do it, still think about the alignment. And when you find out that you're not aligned, what do you do? Any ideas?
Discuss.
Yes? And you find out that you're not aligned. What do? You
leave and find a game you're aligned with.
Yes, exactly. You try to be aligned, but if you cannot get on the same page what you want from this particular campaign, then you split the people. You try to find a game that you can work together. If you cannot get on the same page what you want from this particular campaign, then you split the people. it doesn't help that you are in a group that is trying to do something that you don't like, or the other way around. In your group, you have someone who wants something that you don't want. It's just gonna make people miserable. They don't like it. They're forced to be there. And most commonly, this issue comes when you already had a group of friends, and you want to spend time together, and you just decided that, okay, let's do it by role-playing. So what do you do then? And there you have two things. First of all, my suggestion, my recommendation to everyone is, like I said, just spread out. Try new things. Try different people, different groups, different systems, different settings. It's going to help you, and it's going to make you enjoy more. But even if you want to play, at least want to have that one game with that particular group, then just find that game that everyone is willing to jump into. If you have an idea and there's someone who really just they don't want to play that game, okay, then together find that one campaign, that one setting, one whatever, that everyone is excited about. Don't try to force it. Yes.
Yeah, I actually had a thing come up in mind when I was running one of my campaigns that I didn't discuss it like particularly enough that like almost everyone was like had like kind of morally gray characters, but then there was one of my friends who had like this hero character, and then when I had a boss fight that had like, well, some civilians were injured and killed in there, so then the hero friend got really upset about that, and it was like a kind of a really awkward and like a thing that should have been discussed earlier. So
Yeah, that's one of those special expectations kind of thing, that people are different. If you're playing with your friends, you usually know them quite well, so you know what is okay for them, what is not okay for them. But if you come to play in an environment where there are like a convention, or you have a group of people you kind of know, but then you kind of create a new gaming group, it's good to go through some kind of like core questions, exactly like, can the players, the PCs, not the players, can the PCs do something evil, for example? Is it okay for everyone? Because that can be someone obvious that no, and someone else obvious yes. So it's good to talk about this until you have the idea that you are now aligned. Someone there, yes?
Yes. Yeah, so one approach I have had for some years is that I have some time on my hands. I want to run a campaign, so I put out for example, my latest campaign started that I want to run a game every other Thursday. And then I asked my friends then, do you want to play every other Thursday? And then after we got that, we discussed what we want to play every other Thursday. So there was D&D 1, Ring 2E, and so forth. And finally then D&D 1 out of these.
Yeah, that's good. How this usually goes for me is that usually I have an idea of a campaign what I want to run. And then once I have enough of the kind of pieces in places, I create a pitch for the campaign. So I tell what it's about. I try to, of course, kind of market it a bit. Why am I excited about it? And then I tell to some of the people that I think that might be excited about it as well, who might want to join in. And if that enough of those people join, that I have enough players, then that's it. I don't have to do anything. But if it's not enough, then I start branching out. I try to find more players, new people who I have not played with. And when you do this, you start to create a bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger player base that you know and have played before. And at some point, you just realize that you're not actually anymore branching out, because you always find the people. Actually, it goes the other way around. You have too many people who want to join the campaigns very quickly.
For our players, I know that a lot of us are also writers, so we like to make our own characters and stuff. And I know that they want to like have their big character moments and really feel included in the story. Our current campaign doesn't really do that because it kind of got messed up. We didn't really write backstories before the campaign started, and now it's been difficult for everyone. But how I solve this issue is that I want to run a campaign after our current one ends, and I asked everyone for their backstories. Like, we won't even play the campaign for another half a year, probably, but I asked their backstories probably idea of the campaign, and when they gave me the backstories, I could easily implement them in the story. And one of my players' backstories actually helped me solve a crucial problem I was having with my writing. So now I know that they will all feel included and get their expectations met with the character things.
Yeah, I think that's a very good kind of approach, as long as it's possible, in the sense that these people who are involved don't need the game right now. I've used a lot of time for this topic, and I use a lot of time for this topic because this comes up all the time. I'm not very active in Reddit, for example, but still I check it out every now and then, and this is probably the second most common issue people come there, and the person who has the problem has no idea that this is the reason why they have the problem. So if you solve this, you've solved 2/3 of your problems usually. Okay. Weird topic for people who probably have been playing for quite a long time, but there's a reason. So, how do we actually play role-playing? This is something, when I was, before I started playing about 15 years ago, I had some friends who were role-playing. I was trying to ask them, how do you role-play? What does it mean? How do you actually do this? And they didn't have answers. They said that only way you can kind of explain is by playing and showing. But actually, role-playing comes down to very simple structure. The GM describes the scene, basically what's going on, what your character can see or perceive, see, hear, smell, whatever. Then the players describe how their PCs want to interact with that, what they want to change, or what they want to talk to someone. Okay, that's interacting with that scene. They want to hit someone, that's a way to interacting. They want to climb up somewhere, that's a way to interact with the scene. And then the GM describes, or first decides how they want to resolve that attempt. So I want to go and hit this guy. The GM decides, okay, will you hit? Will you deal damage? Will they die? Will whatever happen? The GM has to decide how they resolve it. And I'll actually come back to the golden and silver rule. And then after you have decided, you of course implement your way of resolution, and then you narrate the results to the players, which creates a new scene or new status for the scene, and then we go back to the step 1. Okay? I don't know what that. But and then you just rinse and repeat. This is what you do while you're role-playing, all the time. It's this simple. What people usually have problems with is the step 3. The GM truly is supposed to decide how to resolve the attempt. You don't look at the rule book to tell you. You decide. If you don't need any help in deciding, you know what's going to happen, then just tell that. If you feel that you need help, then look for help. Then, for example, the rule book can give you options how to resolve this. They can tell you make this and this kind of check. Okay, now we make this and this kind of check, and then we use those rules to see whatever you need to roll to get certain kind of result, and then you describe again what that means in the narrative. It might be that you don't want to make a roll. You don't know, you just feel that, hey, can my character lift this rock? Well, let's see how strong is your character. Yeah, he's quite strong. Yes, he can lift it. You just check the stat. You didn't want to make a check out of it. Often people, when they, especially in the beginning, but even if you can play quite a long time role-playing games or kind of like using systems, role-playing systems, and still see them as games with strict rules that you need to follow. But it's not a game with strict rules. It's an experience machine. And the GM there is to help us to get that experience, basically the narrative, the story. And the system that you're using is just there to help you. It doesn't dictate things for you.
something I would like to point out here, I delve a lot also in systems and such, is that, for instance, in D&D, when you're open the book and it's talking about how the system works, it's like, yeah, here is like a framework for you to do whatever you want, right? But as you go through the different classes and different races, it still gives that vibe of traditional games where you have strict rules and such.
Yeah.
So it simultaneously tells you, dude, do whatever you want, go wild. But when you read different parts of the book, if you haven't read the first part, it's like, no, it's like this. This class, when it levels up, it gets this, this, and that. Oh, but does it make sense for my character? No, it doesn't. But it still goes in that direction.
Yeah.
So I think it's not just about players just imposing their vision of the game, but it's also the system itself not communicating clearly to people.
Yeah, it tricks you. I know. This is more or less actually what is exactly in the 5e Player's Handbook. And that's why it's so important. I mean, that's why I took it from there, is because usually people who play D&D are the people who play it as a game, that you have to follow the rules. You make this kind of roll in this kind of moment, and it has this kind of results, and that's it. But actually, exactly, before the even rule starts, it tells you to do this. It doesn't tell you, look page 68 for the rules in step 3. It tells you resolve the attempt in some way that you feel is appropriate for that moment. Once you figure out this, it again helps you a lot. It probably alleviates a lot of stress from you. You don't have to remember rules by heart. You can just run the game, whatever makes sense, and if you want to have the rules, then you can go back and see them. They're there to help you, not to hinder you. The golden rule and silver rule, they're basically stolen from Fate. And this is my recommendation to everyone, is that always focus on the narrative. So what are the characters doing, or the creatures or monsters or whatever they are? What is actually happening in the fictional world? And just focus on that. And what do you want to do? I want to jump over this table and whatever. I don't know. Whatever. My examples are always horrible. But think of it as a movie, or think about it as a novel. What would happen in that? How would it be described in that? And then once you get to the moment that you need to resolve something, then decide how to resolve it and possibly consult the rules. Don't start from the other way around. Start from the rules. My character has these 4 actions they can make. Which of these actions would I like to do? This. And then after the fact, you try to maybe narrate it a bit. It limits what your scenes can be about horribly. It will take role-playing, which I just told you in the beginning. It's a huge, huge, huge bundle of things. And you limit it to this, because you started from the wrong place. And the silver rule is that never let the rules get in the way. So if something makes sense in that setting, and that's the point, what is realistic in that setting, then that's what happens. Don't consult the rules to make nonsensical scenes. Any comments or questions about this?
Just a general comment. It's interesting when we were talking about rules and how they can kind of hinder or restrict decision making or resolving an attempt. Then even if you, as the GM, kind of want to or know that okay, you have the ability to resolve or you know what to go for, but then if you have the players who are more rules heavy, for instance, or want to have that certain action, and then they kind of come in and stop you from actually resolving by going, no, the rule says that you have to do this. Then you kind of have that moment of conflict between GM and player, and then that question comes, how do you resolve that situation? Who takes precedence in that, since you kind of at the same time want to give the player their moment, but then as the GM you kind of have that moment of, okay, how do I do this?
Yep. Two things. The first is this. What are you there to do? What are you playing? What is the activity you're actually doing, wanting to do. If people came there to play more or less a board game, there's nothing wrong with that, but everyone needs to be on board. The other way around, if people came there for a narrative, I don't mean that don't use rules. I mean, if you come there for the full experience of role-playing, then do that. And after that comment, as a GM, don't limit your players unless you have a very good reason to do so. If they describe their action narratively in such a way that you would go in a different direction, and they actually wanted to use, for example, some special ability there, just let them use the special ability as long as it makes sense, but not when it doesn't make any sense. That's the key here. It has to make narrative sense. It has to make sense in that setting, in that scene, in that world. And if it does, let your players have their fun. Rolling, it's a kind of continuation of that. What does it mean when we roll? What is the purpose of rolling? Only roll, well, it kind of comes from the thing that if you as the GM don't know how to resolve the situation, if it's obvious what should happen, then just make that thing happen. Only when it's unclear for you what should happen, start making rolls. Rolling is basically just randomizing results. That's the purpose of it. It will say that we don't know what should happen, but we know that there is some kind of probability distribution there, so let's just make a roll. Many things could happen, but I don't know what of those should happen. Then, most people stop at this. Not everyone even gets to this. They just roll because the rules said to roll. But you should also require additional things, which is that if the character succeeds, there's something interesting at the end of that rainbow. And if they fail, there is also something interesting there. Because if it's uninteresting, you know that it's an uninteresting outcome, what they can end up with. Why would you want to have an uninteresting scene or a moment on purpose? Largely, this is just how you interpret those rolls. So actually, the roll is the same. You roll 14 plus bonus 2, 16. Nothing changed there. But two different people will interpret that differently. The generic way of seeing, I'm using a lot of D&D as an example because people know it. It's a binary system. You roll high enough, you get exactly what you wanted, according to the rules still. It limits what it means, what you can get, but you get exactly what you wanted. You don't roll high enough, you get nothing. Nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. That is a very boring outcome. We used our time to get nothing. Who wants that? Probably no one. So when you have the option, turn that nothing into something. Don't say that you're trying to open a door. It doesn't matter how you want to open it. Let's say you have a rogue character, you want to picklock it. Okay? The GM thinks, what now? They can just choose, you're a rogue, you have thieves' tools, you just open the lock. There's no need to roll. Let's just move on. You get them to have their moment. Or maybe it is a difficult environment. You don't know what should happen. There are enemies around. It's a difficult lock. Let's see. Let's make a roll. So you succeed, something interesting happens. That interesting thing can be simply that the door opens nicely because there's something interesting on the other side. But if they fail, there should still be something interesting. It shouldn't be, you failed, you cannot get through this door. Okay, we just end this campaign here. Okay, let's go home. That's a very uninteresting outcome. So instead, for example, if you fail, maybe you still get it open, but the guards come in before you manage to go through it, the door. Maybe there's a trap. Maybe it was an illusion to begin with. Maybe something else, whatever fits your setting. Make the failure interesting. If you cannot come up with something interesting, stop making rolls, just for the sake of the rule saying that you need to make a roll. And usually what it means is that you start to you start to come up with more interesting outcomes now that you stop rolling. Critical failures. Many systems have critical failures, and the problem with those is that usually players feel when they roll a critical failure that they're being punished. And that is the worst possible outcome. Don't punish the player because they rolled a critical failure. Make that into a narrative moment. Something extra interesting happens. Depending on, again, what system you're using, they might even have rules for this, they might have some kind of aid for this, but even if you're using a simple D&D, make it interesting. Make it extra interesting because it's now a critical failure. You can come up with something completely scene-changing if that's what you want, but you can also do it something more mundane. But make it interesting, don't punish the players. They are also a way for you to be surprised, because usually we kind of like know the environment where we can construct campaigns in different ways, scenes different ways, but mostly GMs know what's going to happen, or what at least can happen, and what is probably going to happen. But when someone makes a critical failure, you can change the scene and let's see what happens. You basically start giving the players agency in that moment. You create a new situation where they have to react, and then let's see how they react, and that can change the course of the campaign, at least for a short time. So critical failures is also something that makes it more interesting, not just for the players, but for the GM as well. Any comments or questions?
Something I have to say about this one, I think a lot of people here in this room probably also have the same feeling about it, is the range of outcomes you can have by rolling the dice. People might have completely different expectations of what can happen when you get a critical success, for instance. People come up with some absurd action they want to take. They already have in their minds what would be the ideal resolution for that action. And then they roll a nat 20, and then they're expecting the DM to be like, okay, so what amazing outcome there's coming out of this. But for you, the DM is like, there was never the chance of happening the way that you wanted, because you were like so far off the mark, right? So there's this problem about the agency of the player kind of rubbing against the agency of other players, of the DM itself, because it's like, you don't want to give the player ultimate power to do whatever they want, because that's also affecting the other players' ability to affect the world. So there's this like having to control the agency of the individual characters. It's a cooperative game, so you're not building your main character and everyone else is just like secondary characters.
Sure. I'm not sure if you're referring to what I said about the critical failure. The point is not in my suggestion that you would kind of like let the player choose what happened, for example. It's that you change the whole scene in a way that you had no idea this is going to happen. And now, because how they react to it can actually change the course of the campaign. When it comes to, in general, that, here, step 2 is important. If the players focus on narrating what their characters are attempting to do, this doesn't happen. That problem doesn't exist, because they're telling you what they're attempting to do. I'm trying to get past that guard without them noticing me.
Yeah.
But if they just say that I roll stealth, the GM has no idea what they're actually trying to achieve. So then we can have this conflict of expectations very easily.
Yeah, I mean, like, for instance, example, very silly one, like, oh, I want to kiss the dragon. It's like, sure, you can try that, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you're gonna be able to do that. And then roll a nat 20. It's like in the perception of some people, it's like, oh, I must succeed that, right? I roll.
Sure. Exactly. It comes to this, that what makes narrative sense, really.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it's about aligning expectations.
Yeah,
So what can happen just because the rules have a critical success or failure? What can happen in this world? It's like, if there is no magic in your setting, rolling 20 doesn't suddenly create magic in your setting. You had the first.
Comment to that situation, that if the situation is such that the player cannot succeed at all, I would not allow the player to make.
Sure, it is, exactly.
Yeah.
Success must be interesting.
Yeah, because then there will be disappointment, because if I allow them to roll, they roll that 20, then I tell them it doesn't happen,
Sure.
doesn't go well.
This your example about kissing the dragon. If it really is impossible to kiss the dragon, that doesn't necessarily mean that don't make a roll. You can still give an interesting outcome. They just didn't get what they kind of thought about.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was going to comment on as well, that I would usually want to let the players have a role on something that they cannot fully succeed in when I think that there's a range of interesting failures. Like for instance, they will fail differently if they roll very high or very low. That the very high failure will still give them something interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like if it's a situation which is obvious to the character, you can't succeed. I want to jump 20 meters up high. I'm not going to ask for a roll because your character knows you can. You jump up, you went 1 meter. Okay, moving on. But if it's something like this, they have no idea what the dragon is thinking. So then you can allow that the dice become a narrative creation method.
Yeah, exactly. One really good example I heard is when the players, for example, fail a perception check. Maybe they're looking for bandits in a dark forest and they try to roll perception if they can see anything, and they roll a 5. Just telling them, oh, you don't see anything. Like, what do you mean? They must see something still, but it's not the thing they were looking for. For example, with that 5, they could maybe see a pair of eyes in the trees, and when they shoot it down, it's actually just an owl. And now that arrow that they shot has alerted the bandits that they are here, and they cannot sneak there anymore. Or something like that. Just like make a failure interesting and not just you didn't do it.
Yeah. You rolled critical failure in perception. You see nothing, you're being blind. In most cases, not interesting, but it could be. Sorry, I have to ask, how long do I have? Is it 2:45?
20 minutes. 1 hour and 20 minutes.
So it's until 3, basically?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so with that whole wanting to kiss the dragon example, building on that, if something like the player wants to do is just completely unrealistic to achieve, and let's say they roll really well, maybe you can just take it to another direction. Let's say, okay, what's the best realistic outcome you can get out of this? Okay, you rolled a nat 20. The dragon is very amused by your audacity and lets you choose something from their hoard. Maybe you pick up a magic trinket or something instead of just being offended, stomping you to the ground.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, a very, very controversial topic. Would you raise your hand if you, in your games as a GM, fudge the dice? Okay. If you don't fudge the dice, could you raise your hand? Okay. Quite even from those who participated, a bit more of those who fudged the dice. Well, going back to the slide before, basically when you fudge the dice, you have decided first that, hey, I wanna resolve this action or this kind of attempt by making a roll. And then you made the roll, and then you're like, no, I'm not happy with this outcome, I choose something else instead. You're telling yourself that you made a bad call by choosing the roll to begin with. This is my first reason why I don't actually ever recommend fudging the dice. Because if you, after fudging the dice, come to a different conclusion, what is the best way to resolve it, you probably chose to roll because you didn't think about it.
But surely you don't mean you can't fix the mistake.
No, I can't.
End the campaign because everyone died.
Yes, that's a quite exactly. Well, we come to those later.
Well, so my comment here is that I think the failure for me that causes me to fudge the dice is that I chose to play D&D when I should have played a different system because I only fudge the dice in combat. Usually it's to prevent the enemies from having a streak of crits. So they rolled their turn, not 20 in a single turn. I just decided that was not a nat 20.
Okay.
So how do you fix that other than just by playing a system that is not D&D? How do you fix the combat dice passing?
First, I need to check what was my next bullet point here because I'm not sure. Yes. Well, so this doesn't mean that you're supposed to kill your players when random chance happens.
Characters.
Yes. What I said is also true. My point is simply that usually there are a bunch of better ways to solve the problem than starting fudge the dice. Of course, if you were not prepared and things that you realize it way, way, way too late and you can't think of anything in that moment, then fine, fudge the die in that moment, but even better, tell it to your players. Don't try to create in that moment the fiction that you didn't actually create. Just let them know. Change the scene in that moment, openly. But actually what I would still do is just change the scene, not openly. So the first thing is, we actually come to this a bit later, so I won't go I won't talk about it very long. First, when you plan or design your scenes, design them, well, actually it's the first starting point is align your expectations. There are players who it's the soul of the game that their character can die, and then there are players who never want to see their character die, and then there's a lot of people in between, so just align expectations, that's the first thing. The second is when you design your scenes, design them in thinking what kind of game you're playing. Generally speaking, in my campaigns, I almost never design combat. Combat happens because the PCs decide to have combat. It's always their decision. If they decide, let's go back to D&D, at level 1, go and challenge a red dragon, they die. Period. They made the choice. They were fully aware what they were doing. I don't design that combat. That's the first thing. When you design combat, think of what is plausible. What kind of outcomes are plausible? Is this meant to be a deadly combat or not? If not, think why is it not going to be deadly combat? What's going to happen in this combat most likely, and how can you react to potentially exactly these absurd moments when the players can only roll 1 and the NPCs only 20? What will you do? What's your kind of like approach? I don't mean that really write the whole thing. I mean, what is your approach to that situation? And when you're in that scene, you usually start, very few systems are such that everyone is full health, and then combat starts, action 1, PC died. Very few systems are, but those that are, again, align expectation. Probably the players are prepared for it, most likely. Otherwise, it's going to be a weird group of people. So you see that things are going south. So you have time to react. You can start to change things. You can, if you never thought about it, you just go, hey, this is looking cool, this monster, let's just put it there. And then you're like, oh shit, they're starting to look like they're losing. You start creating more. Okay, what is this monster actually about? What do they want? How do they live? What are their motivation? I was surprised, heavily surprised, in one of the D&D campaigns when we were, I don't remember, we were maybe level 5-ish, and suddenly we confronted a purple worm. And I was like, well, as a player, I would do this. My character would do this. Which do I do? Do I roleplay my character or do I play the game? I decided to roleplay my character, and it ended up in the purple worm eventually running away. Why? Because the purple worm is a predator. Its natural agenda in life is not to kill everything in its proximity. It doesn't go hunting every single living being it can perceive. It was hunting the PCs. It saw prey. The prey was fighting back. Oh, I'm not that hungry. It went away. I was super surprised that our GM decided to do that in D&D. That's an example of what you can do. fudging the dice is usually a narrative problem, which usually is best solved with a narrative solution, not by game mechanical solution. Usually, characters are doing the wrong things when this happens. The scene is designed just as a combat challenge when this happens. But and then I've given an example. Why do you fudge the dice? Is because in D&D 3.5, the axe has a triple crit. So on level 1, triple crit kills. So I'm like, why do you have triple crits in your axes in your game if you don't like it? Just change one thing, change that one thing. My NPCs don't have triple crits. No need to fudge anymore. Fudging the dice has a lot of problems, and of course the biggest is that you are telling your players that this is how we run things, and then that's not what you're actually doing. You're lying to your players. And when they realize that you're lying to your players, they will lose their immersion. They will lose, if they're that kind of player that really likes the excitement that comes from potentially dying. If they know that you just saved them, they're going to have a bad day because of it. They would rather died. But especially they would rather had a scene which was interesting but not surprisingly deadly. So design the scenes in a way that doesn't probably cause these kind of situations where you feel the need to fudge. It's a lot better way to solve fudging the dice than in that moment fudge the dice. While you're having the scene, you probably have many times the opportunity to change something. You can change how the existing characters behave. You can change literally the environment. You can bring in new characters. You can change agendas. You can do so many things that you don't ever need to fudge the dice.
What if very long series of bad rolls is basically ruining the game for a player? You know, every single time they try to make a save for something, or in this game save or something, every time that it keeps failing, out of divine bad luck or something. Wouldn't that be a good case to fudge some of that?
The first is that usually players roll for themselves, so they know.
Yeah, but if you're
And
rolling something.
yeah, and if you are rolling for them, I don't actually. Again, I will come back to the actual answer in a minute. But if you're rolling, let's say perception, hidden perception, they don't know whether they're rolling bad or just below or what is even the difficulty. So they usually are not feeling that bad because they don't know that they're rolling 2s and 3s only.
No, but more like if you are rolling a save for a monster they're fighting, or different situation like they are trying to do intimidation against something, and basically the campaign is not progressing because they keep failing those rolls, unfortunately.
Campaign or an individual fight. There's a big.
Not a fight, but
Yeah. So
more.
okay, then easiest.
Intimidation.
Make the failure interesting. I think you came a bit later. Maybe you weren't here. Make the failures interesting. This is this is easiest outside combat because combat is usually more rigidly ruled. People have expectation that they make game mechanically powerful options because the rules say that this is game mechanically powerful. Outside combat, this is super easy. If they come to a situation, let's say there are guards there. A rogue could say, I try to sneak past them without them seeing. Someone else comes, I want to intimidate them. Someone else comes, I want to persuade them to let me pass. Make the outcome still interesting. Don't make it just a wall, no. Ever. That is always very boring.
So this is not going to work for all groups because it's a bit controversial to add the NPCs, but for like big fights that are upcoming, I will introduce a DMPC earlier. Their purpose is not to steal the spotlight, but they are there to have some character that the PCs are going to be more attached to. And then in the fight, what you can actually do is if the PCs are rolling very badly, the enemies will focus more on the DMPC and the first failure in the fight rather than just fully failing the important moment in the campaign is that the DMPC dies. And that gives gives you a bit of leeway because you can balance it that way that the enemies, if they are rolling very well and the pieces are rolling very badly, that's what you do first. Focus on the DM pieces that the players are attached to.
Yeah. This is again, it depends on what system you're using. Some systems have this integrated already. Let's say maybe the first, well, actually it was the first system because it was the second system I ever used. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd Edition. It has what is called a fate point. When the character is about to die, they don't die. They lose a fate point. And then you change the narrative in such a way that they don't die. It does exactly this. You don't fudge dice. They had a meta resource that basically changes the scene in such a way that the character does not die. That's a good way to maybe start getting into the philosophy of not fudging dice. What can I do to kind of like prevent accidental character deaths?
Not exactly fudging dice, but I find that rolling dice as the GM adds to the suspense for the players. And it gives a lot of buy-in to players when they think that, or they see that they can't just narrate their own success. So I use a GM screen for both the reason that I have all the tables and the players then have all the information that they need on their side. But that also allows me to roll dice in secret, and especially these what you say like hidden perception rolls and sneaking rolls, etc. are really good to do because even though I've already decided that yes, the rogue can sneak past everybody and have his rogue moment because nothing is more frustrating as a rogue than you fail one sneak check and then everything falls apart. I keep rolling the dice and I don't even look at I look down so I look like I'm looking at the dice, but I don't actually fudge them because I've already decided. But I give the players the illusion that ooh, this is very, very tense and you're just barely passing these all these very, very difficult checks, even though they're rolling I'm rolling 2s and 3s and whatever.
Yeah. I do that as well with certain systems.
That's
Exactly.
fudging the dice.
No, it's not.
Fudging the results.
It's actually neither, because it is this. It's step 3. I do that as well. I mainly play using a VTT, and in my VTT, whenever I make a roll, they see that dice is being rolled. They just don't see the results. So I can make just rolls. Okay, interesting. They have no idea what's going on.
But you are cheating your players. You say you should not fudge the dice because you cheat.
No, I'm creating exactly. I'm creating. You just said it. What it was? Suspense. Nothing else. I'm not cheating them by the way the game works or how the campaign works. I'm creating. What is it called? I'm jump starting their imagination. That's what I'm doing. I'm doing something that makes them start to think that what could be coming.
Randomly roll a handful of dice and say nothing.
Yeah.
What's even more fun is you write on a piece of paper, everything is okay, then you pass it to a player, and nobody else sees it, and the player starts saying, everything is okay. And just watch what happens around them.
Yeah. Or you can make a roll. You can also do it the other way around. That if you don't want to make rolls yourself so much, that you ask your players to still make the rolls, and then you're like, okay. Did you have a rope? Okay, then it's okay.
One thing I realize that functional dice might be sort of agreeable as well is that, comparing to a scenario, if you are trying, imagine you are trying to buy ice cream, but you cannot decide between the 2 flavors. You flip a coin, and instead of selecting based on the result that you have assigned to, heads or tails, you think like, what's the first reaction to it? Like, are you yes, I got this flavor, or it's like, that tells you what you actually want. So it's a similar thing with functional dice. You roll for something that you are not sure about, and then your reaction to the result itself is like, okay, what is the result I actually want or not? So if it's hard for you to decide what outcome do you actually want, between 2 different choices, for example, that would be a scenario that you roll, and instead of using the result itself, you use how you feel about the result to make the decision.
Sure, if that helps. The key there is exactly that you kind of knew what you're doing in advance. Instead of first going for the kind of like a game mechanical resolution, and then you start to in midway change it. And no, actually, this was just to tell me. Oh, yes. I saw one hand somewhere there. Yes.
Yeah, but passing a note, I just saw online somebody have done it in a way that players were suspecting a double ganger, and GM gives a note to one player, act suspicious, you'll get a +3 longsword.
I have one comment to make. Isn't it too dangerous for all the DMs, GMs around in this room saying that, yeah, I fudged the dice. Yes, I tell my players that I rolled the dice and I actually didn't take that into account. Wouldn't it cause their players that are in the room be like, oh, so you actually do that? And then the next time you play with them, they're like, I don't know if you're actually rolling the dice or not. You kind of break a bit of the suspense because they're already expecting you to do that kind of.
Sure.
Fudge.
Yeah, can be.
I've never
But
played with any of you. I swear I have not fudged any dice.
usually, if you play with this, more or less the same group, they know. And like I said, it kills some of the immersion and it kills some of the suspense. And because you can't know when exactly it happens, so you start to assume it happens exactly when the game is most exciting, which is the worst possible effect.
Is it actually about the dice and whatnot on already settling the setting the expectations? So as long as if everyone wants to play by the dice, then of course we don't watch them. But
Yeah.
if it's no one really cares about the dice and it's just used for a little insight every now and then it's entirely different thing.
Okay, I think we've kind of like, well, not really. Yeah, good. So, what does make action in your games actually interesting? Why usually the most interesting scenes are the action scenes? Not always. You can just have also a campaign where there is no action at all. But still, usually there is some action. It just varies in form. What is the thing that makes action interesting? Is it rolling well? A lot of people, usually when they start, it really comes about the rolling. They like rolling. To some, it's also just important to have the physical dice. Even when they're playing in a VTT, they still want the physical dice. It's about the rolling the dice. But does that really give you like, woohoo, 17? Suck it. You failed. Yeah, but still 17. Probably not. If you just like rolling dice, take some dice, start rolling. That's all you need. You don't need to role play. You can separate those two activities completely. Is it about winning? No, someone else already said this is a cooperative game. That's what it makes role playing also one of the many things that makes it very special. It's not a competitive game. Also, never make it one. It's not player versus player, and it's not player versus GM ever. It's a cooperative game. So if these are not the things that makes it interesting, what makes it interesting? Anyone? Rule of cool. We are kind of like in the right area, maybe a bit more specific. But how is it tied to action specifically? Why is action making you have fun? Exactly. It's drama, and it's the arc of drama. So my recommendation to everyone is to, since this is the most powerful thing you have in your game, focus on it. Give it its time and space. When you have combat in D&D, the most common complaint probably is it takes too long. If people are having fun, fun rarely takes too long. They're not having fun. That's the problem. Not that the combat takes too long. And they're usually not having fun because it has become just rolling the dice and not about the drama. Why are these characters even in this room? What are they trying to achieve? What is happening in the narrative? Why is the thing that someone attempts, why is it cool? What makes it exciting? What are the agendas of the different characters or entities in that scene? It's the drama. This is why we watch movies and read novels, mainly, in the end. So focus on that. Give it its time and space. And it may sound weird if you feel that combat takes too long and then you start to add the drama there. So basically you start to focus on the narrative, the fiction. You are spending even more time in describing things, but it makes it meaningful. When you start to use time, transferring time from meaningless to meaningful, you will have a lot more fun. And just instead, if you want to save some time, make the combat different somehow. Make it faster, less kind of combatants, or make them squishier or whatever, but don't take all the time from this, because this is the thing that actually people remember. They don't remember that they rolled 17. They remember what happened in the narrative when they rolled the 17. Someone there had a
I've noticed, I've always hated the DM like fight scenes, combat, because it has felt like it takes forever. But the combats that I have really liked of late has been about saving someone. There is a kind of time limit, a round limit that you have to get out of the place, or you have to get that person to safety. That makes the combat so much more interesting. As a DM, like, are they gonna make it? And also probably as a player, are we gonna make it?
Yeah.
So yeah, the drama really makes difference.
Yep.
I feel it ties to narrative first. If you want to oversimplify combat, it's just making sure that your opponent runs out of hit points before you do. But having that extra stick of tension, that extra axis of not just my pool of these points, not just my opponents, having the external either time limit to save someone, their pool of hit points to save them before it runs out, or other iterations, like as an example, any kind of escalation. More people are coming, so we need to get out of here, as an example. The enemies being an obstacle rather than just the objective. Just overall iterations and the extra access, I feel every single time I've held combat myself has been what's made it more engaging for players. As an example, I held a campaign for brand new players, and I tried to kidnap them rather than, just fighting. Having some sort of a group of, I can't recall how many bandits, try to kidnap them and the NPCs with them. Having them all band around to, keep the NPCs safe, ensure that none of them comes to harm. I wasn't even killing their hit points at that moment. Just the extra axis of, it's not just emptying numbers, not just worrying if I hit, it's worrying about, hey, they're tangled in the net, I need to get across and untangle them, and so on and so on. Feel, even as a player, not just as a DM, having more than just numbers thrown at me is what makes the action scene into an actual scene rather than just a chore. Because I feel, at least when I started, first in game, combat easily became routine. Going through the motions of everything in this. So I agree a lot with the assessment of just having the extra thing to focus on.
Yeah. That's really an important kind of part, especially in the beginning when you set up a scene. We can actually come back to that later, how to make encounters. Usually having an encounter as what I said earlier, as a kind of like a combat challenge is not very interesting. It's very, very difficult to do so. So if you have, first of all, at least minimum should have some kind of narrative reason for it. Why is it happening? What are those characters trying to achieve? That's the bare minimum. And that creates drama for those characters. And then you can add into that, make the scene about something else than people killing each other. Very rarely you have that kind of, if you watch a movie, how many times the movie is about just two people or group of people just killing each other for no reason, just doing it, and they continue until everyone in the other team is dead, and then like, okay, let's go home. You don't have that because that would be super boring, unless you're just having a very short intro, kind of a demo of some cool fight scenes and whatever. The same applies to role-playing. Focus on the fiction, focus on the drama. Give it time and space. It will make those scenes far more interesting to everyone.
Well, I have a comment on this, that you don't necessarily need to have suspense for combat to be interesting or for action to be interesting. Sometimes the players can have a lot of fun when they already know for certain that they're going to win. For instance, one of the more memorable combats for one of my campaigns was that the players already knew that they were going to be attacked by pirates that were bumbling idiots. And they know already that they're going to win, but it still became very fun watching the pirates come there with a plan that has no chance of working, and then running into each other's ships and trying to run off in the end. There can be interesting action that has no suspense, just because the players find it fun that something surprising happens, even though they know that they are going to win.
Yeah. That reminded me of actually two things. First of all, I was one as a player. I was playing just two players, and we were both dwarves, and we were in a human city, and then suddenly just street robbers tried to rob us. Game mechanically, we were overwhelming them. But it was one of the funnest fight scenes in that whole campaign, because it was all about it. Because we were so much more powerful than them, we could just focus on role-playing our characters. It became only about our characters and how our characters would react in that moment. And in our situation, it was all about just differences between dwarves and humans, and it was super fun. And it's because we focused on something else other than winning. Everybody knew that we were going to win, and we focused on something other than the game mechanics. We were just playing our characters.
Exactly. I only have two memorable combats from our current campaign. One of them wasn't really even a combat. We were running it was like a competition thing, and we used combat rules for that. It was really fun. And if we could focus on the role playing while still doing the running and stuff. But one other combat that was really memorable was one that, first of all, one of our characters initiated. She wanted to cool off some steam after all of our characters had a really big argument and went to just fight some guys. And it was really interesting and fun because all the characters were kind of doing their own thing. Like, she was trying to shoo the rest of us away because this was her fight and not the follower. And our fighter just kind of was confused on what to do and just kind of joined her on the fight. And my character, who is a very friendly and very overly positive person, just tried to stop the fight, and at one point used their action to steal the bard's weapon, so she couldn't initiate the fight anymore. And it was really fun, and I hope we have combat like that. But it was more fun when we focused on the story and why the characters are doing this fight, other than, hey, you encounter some wolves in the forest, now fight them.
And I had to expand actually this, that focusing on the narration or drama or whatever you want to call it. It's not limited to role-playing your characters. It's not limited to having a reason for the combat. It also is about how do you describe what's going on. It's a bit of an extreme example, but there was when Dungeon World came out, people had a lot of difficulties to adjusting to that kind of framework, and then they did this what is called a 16 hit point dragon article, where they describe why is a 16 hit point dragon actually scarier than whatever you have in D&D, and it's because of how they described the combat and what's going on in the narrative. So basically when the dragon was doing stuff, it was literally a dragon moving in a city or village, I don't remember anymore. So it would affect buildings. When it would attack the character, this is a bit, it comes from the system, when it attacked successfully a character, instead of just losing hit points, it literally lost an arm. Focusing on what's happening in the narrative makes it far more powerful. It's not about numbers, it's not about managing resources, it's about what's happening in that narrative, what is happening in the reality of your character. How does it seem and how would it feel when you see those things doing the things that they're doing? Maybe I should say here as well. I once had a start of a combat scene. I didn't decide that it's not going to be combat. I just kind of assumed, guessed correctly that my players are going to make it one. They were hunting, not hunting, they were trying to follow someone. And then they caught up with him. And then in the beginning of the scene, the person would make the sun fall from the sky. And everything became dark, except that then the sun fell from the sky to the ground and created a campfire, creating some light so everybody could see actually still each other. That narration set the scene. It told the players, but especially the PCs, of the power of this character that they're now encountering. But game mechanically, I did nothing. There's no action, there's no attack, nothing. I just narrated something that happened in the environment of the PCs. But it made it completely different scene for the players. So, like I said, give it time and space. Focus on what's going on there in the PC world. Okay, action-based monsters. Has someone heard this term before? Few. I said that a lot of this comes from me trying different systems and just kind of like loaning ideas from different systems and applying them in other systems and engineering role-playing. Some of that comes from Matthew Colville and his videos. If you haven't checked it out, maybe skip the first 5-ish, which are too basic, and then go maybe up to 50. He has a lot of good basic ideas that I agree with, some which I don't agree with, but he still talks about those topics in a very good manner. One of those is action-based monsters. I actually apply this a bit differently from him, but it's a very good idea. What is an action-based monster? Simply is that you, instead of thinking about that it exists, instead of thinking that you have this monster that exists and you make sure that it needs to exist in this scene long enough, you focus on what does it do. So having a monster with higher stats is not going to make that monster or that combat any more interesting. If you just ramp up stats, nothing changes other than numbers. The impact to the players is not going to change. Making sure that that monster exists 16 rounds instead of 6 doesn't make it more fun to the players. What you want to do is having an engaging, interesting combat scene. So focus on what is that, let's call it a monster. It can be a human being. It doesn't have to be a physically, actual monster. What is that monster known for in the fictional world? What is a dragon for the PCs? What do dragons do? One of the things that I was, and still am, but I was very disappointed about when I read 5e Monster Manual was that all the dragons felt the same. They always had one special ability usually, but other than that, they're basically the same thing. And they were pretty much the same thing as any other big monster except they had wings. And they didn't provide really anything that would make it feel like a dragon. How is it different? I refer to, for example, that 16 hit point dragon article. That felt like a dragon, because dragons are known for something that destroys cities, wins not only individual fights, but wars. Make a dragon feel like that. Give it abilities, actions, that make it feel like that. You can come up with these extra things to any creature, any monster in your game, in any system. Don't be afraid to add them. They still, especially if they are actions. Well, actually, especially if they are actions, they still have to use those actions. They're consuming their limited number of actions to do those new cool things. And when they do these new cool things, they don't have to mean more damage to the PCs. Usually they are exactly something other than damage to the PCs. If a dragon's main key thing is that it can fight and make that relevant in the combat, stop fighting in the ground, the dragon would never engage in ground because it has been living in the sky its whole world, whole life, which can be hundreds, if not thousands of years, depending on your setting. Why would it come for this scene to fight the PCs on the ground? Why? It wouldn't. So make it about that. Is it fair? No, it's not meant to be fair. But it feels special. So maybe the scene is not about fighting the dragon. Like I said, I very rarely, if ever, actually design combat scenes. Maybe it's about the PCs getting somewhere, and this dragon just happens to live there. The scene is about how do we get there. The players can choose that, okay, the easiest way to get there is to kill the dragon, who is now a danger for us. Or they can just try to hide from it, or they can try to do something other, more clever things. But don't be afraid to make the dragon feel like a dragon for example, game mechanical reasons. So whenever you give them stuff, give them extra actions. Don't give them extra hit points. Don't give them higher saves. Don't make sure that they survive with simple numbers. Make them do things that are dragony. And the easiest way is to give them small things that they can repeat. So instead of having one action, which is the normal action, they can only take one action during their turn, give them extra actions. They can do small things, which are, again, very dragony. Makes them feel like an actual dragon. D&D has technically an action, bonus action, reaction available for everyone. How many monster manual creatures actually have bonus actions and reactions? Give them those. And make sure that those are coming from the fluff of that monster. What is that monster known for in that setting? Give them a bonus action to do that. Give them a reaction to do that. The biggest innovation in D&D 5e, in my opinion, is legend reactions. It allows that monster to do something outside its turn, so it will influence the scene more often. It even allows them to react. Well, reaction is also a way to react, but it allows them to react to the things what the PCs are doing, which makes it far more interesting, and especially as a narrative. It doesn't have to make sense time-wise, that how can this, because one round is still at same time, I think it's 6 seconds in D&D, that if you have your own turn, you do all your things, that's 6 seconds, and now it's someone else's turn, and you start to do additional things. How can you have this time to do all these things? It doesn't have to make sense. We're not playing a simulation here. I told you already earlier, role-playing is not really a game. It's an experience creation machine. So feel free to give it more actions and make those actions always about what it is. If it's a human being, if it's a fire mage, what are fire mages known for in this setting? Let them do cool things. Don't be afraid of that. The cooler the thing, the better. Just that doesn't mean that they deal a lot and lots of damage all the time. That makes them just dangerous, not necessarily cool. Any?
Something that comes to mind here for me with the extra actions and so on. I feel a lot of people I've spoken with are afraid of making the enemies intelligent. So, as an example, targeting someone. squishy wizard and so on. But even if you don't hammer it with damage on damage, having just small enemies that, as an example, ensembles that know how to flank, just even without an actual physical threat of someone being defeated, just the narrative tension of an enemy being able to maneuver around you already makes for a lot more interesting things in combat rather than just once more moving for a wall. But it becomes something interesting rather than an obligation.
Yeah, I mean, especially if and when the players can see the contrast. If they're fighting against random thugs, they're probably not, very they know how to hit hard because they're strong, but they're not necessarily very intelligent in fighting tactics, and they might not be working together very well. And so if you have later them fighting against an actual military group, even if they don't have better stats, they can be completely different as an opponent. Exactly because of this. They do different things because they are different people.
Yeah, like an example, a mage knows a mage, usually. A common type from the street might not know someone by their clothes or other narrative items like this. As an example, if I go back to the kidnapping encounter I spoke about earlier, in this encounter, I had drawn to the physical appearances of the characters in the party. As an example, a short bird like Kenku was the first to go for the webs and the ropes and nets and so on that they tried to use to kidnap them because, narratively, an organized group trying to adopt the party was going to go for the weakest one first, and then having the other party members try and free the person rose back into the action-based things because, again, smarter enemies.
Yep, I totally agree. Any other comments or questions? Okay, how to make interesting boss encounters. We kind of keep going around and round and round about the same topics, but in the end from different angles. Usually, not necessarily usually, in most systems, one of the big questions is that how are we going to make this boss fight interesting, and one of the things feel special, and one of the reasons is that it's gonna be somehow a bit more longer. Usually you have this kind of smaller fights that they will last very little time, and then you have the boss fight that you want to feel that it lasts a bit longer. I just told you having more hit points to make it just last longer doesn't make it more interesting, so something actually interesting has to happen in that combat to make it interesting. But if you have this traditional boss fight, many systems are struggling with action economy in those moments, that when you have one opponent against multiple opponents, even though the one opponent is stronger, they can be taken down quite easily, or there can be crowd control, or there can be something else that makes the combat or the threat go away very easily or fast. So the first step to me is always to think that if this was a movie, if this was a novel, how would this boss actually survive in that world? Why doesn't, if these random 4 guys, they just come there and kill it easily, why hasn't he been killed already 12 times before this? Why? Is it because it's so difficult to get to him? No one knows who he is. Does he have a huge gang of people always before him, so you have to kill 100 people before you get to the boss? Does he have some kind of superpower? Maybe he's protected by something. He has this magical ring. As long as he has the magical ring, he cannot die. What is it? Like really, in the narrative, in your story, in your world, what is preventing this boss from dying all over again against other people than just the PCs? It's a good starting point. It gives you the answer what you should apply for against the PCs as well, and it gives an immediate narrative reason for them, a believable reason for them, so it doesn't feel like it's just there to prevent the boss from dying. it becomes about the story. They have to do something first before they can get to the boss, for example. The more important your character is for that world, for that story, the more you should focus on narrative abilities, not game mechanical abilities. I told you earlier about that character that the PCs were tracking him, and then they caught him, and then what he did was that he basically made the sun go, drop from the sky. That was a powerful, powerful thing. If that was a spell, it would be a hugely powerful spell. But game mechanically it did nothing. You can do the same thing about anything. Let them narratively, not by a roll, not by using some kind of game mechanical resource, let them do cool things that are about what they are about. Make the scene about something other than killing each other. You can make it about saving someone. You can make it about not being kidnapped. You can make it about a time schedule. There's a bomb ticking, literally or not literally. You can choose. Make it about something other than just killing each other. So you give the players, or actually you give the PCs objectives. And then the players have to balance between these different objectives. What is most important? What is most useful? It's easy to think that, hey, if you just kill everyone else, then you can freely do whatever you need to do. But not in every situation at all. That's not the case. By simply giving narrative-based objectives for the players will make the boss encounter also more interesting and easily gives the boss time to do those cool things that you have developed for them when you made this action-based monster. Utilize environment. Often extremely unused resource. The environment can be the most interesting thing about that scene. Most special. If you think about movies especially, that's often the case. The most cool action scenes are actually about where it happens, not that who does it. Implement that. Any comments or questions? Nope. Sorry. Yeah, it can really be about anything that, like, weather.
To me, a lot of particularly D&D Pathfinder things, it always happens on a nice sunny day. It's summer, probably, unless you specifically go to the mountains where you might need winter clothing.
Yeah.
But it's always summer.
Oh.
I'm a relatively new GM. I don't know if you D&D and then there's some other things. But when I decided to do it exactly on the first time I started the D&D campaign, it was early spring, late winter, lots of puddles everywhere, sleet coming down, just because I wanted to have something else out of bloody summer.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and that's a very good point. And what's important in that kind of situation is that then you make it matter. That someone else would just see that, yeah, there's on this map you have these puddles, but that's just fluff. That affects nothing. But you can also just make it matter. Early in Ukrainian war, the Russian attack stopped. Why? Because spring came. Why? Because it was very difficult to move heavy machinery in the wet soil. Weather.
Yeah, so in games you often see this, that you meet the final boss before you actually get to kill them. But designing this kind of encounter has to be difficult because, like, if you can't kill them, like, what's the fight about? Do you have any solutions to that kind of a thing where you can introduce the boss or even have a little battle with them without it feeling like we have to lose or like we're forced to lose this?
Yes, I think that comes actually. partially in the next slide. The first thing is that why do you want to do that? What is the purpose of that scene? So the GM, when you're running a campaign, the GM should have a reason for every single scene that they introduce to the players, because otherwise we're kind of wasting our time. So why do we want to have that scene? What is the purpose? Is the purpose to introduce the character so later on the players know about it and get kind of start to build a case against it, like this is a really evil guy and we really want to go and take him down? Is that it? If that's the case, then make the evil dude do something evil in that scene, and it's not about the PCs, it's about something else. The simplest is that if we were, for example, in D&D, the power level between different levels, for play there, is so huge that early level characters cannot do anything against higher level characters. So the higher level evil dude, they will just disregard them. Oh, go away, sure. I'm doing this evil thing here now. And if they really try, it's like they literally just slap their faces to get them away from there. They don't care. They're commoners to them. That's one approach. Another approach can be that you can make it, again, it really depends on so many things, but you can make it about something, if it is about the evil dude and the PC specifically, that it's about their relationship, you can make it some kind of a distance communication thing. It can be a bit of a dream, an illusion. What are those called? Those holograms, anything like that. You can make it about that. It's not about. It's about the evil dude, but the evil dude is not actually there. So they have sent. It's very clear that they have sent these evil dudes here to do this evil thing. It's very clear. They have the mark in their chest, the evil mark. That's one way to do it. Or they can even be there, but it's a battleground. It's literally like someone has assaulted, like an army has come in, and they know they can see in the distance there's the leader of them, and they can see all the evil things that they're doing, but they can't get to him because he's over there. He's so far away, and there's this army kind of like, oh no. So we have to react to that assault instead of the evil dude. So we're probably gonna flee or save our loved ones and then flee or something else. Few ideas. Encounters. How to make good encounters. Number one rule for me is that you should never make an encounter for the sake of making an encounter. You should not have combat for the sake of having combat. Instead, you should have narrative, you should have a story, you should have a plot, you should have characters who have agendas, who are then doing things because of those agendas. So if you have an encounter, it happened because of those agendas. Someone wanted something. What did they want? How did they approach it? There's a conflict between what they want. Why is there a conflict? And so on. It should come naturally from the narrative that is happening before the encounter. Don't have just a room for an encounter. That's how D&D started. Actually, how D&D started was basically a tabletop war game, but the second step was to kick in the door. We have an encounter. Just like Munchkin. That's literally, Munchkin has just taken D&D first edition, like literally. Kick in the door, you see there are some orcs here. Let's kill the orcs. Next door, kick in the door. There's some vampires here. Kill the vampires. There's no narrative reason for any of this. It didn't make any sense because it was not about that. But nowadays we know that it's more interesting and it's fun, far more fun when there's a story, when there's a narrative reason for all, because it creates emotional connection and emotional reaction. So make it happen, make it come from the narrative itself already. This helps also in having other objectives, because they always have objectives. People are trying to do things. They don't just exist. They don't just want to kill. They want to achieve something, and maybe the killing is helping them to get it, maybe not. It will help you have far more varied environments, far more varied kind of structures for the combat. Who are they fighting against? What is natural there? What could happen? Think about it like that also. What could happen in this environment? What interesting thing could happen? If this was a novel, how would you create an interesting scene for the novel? What would come from what they've been doing so far?
I think character conflict can be a really powerful tool in combat as well. For example, maybe it's one of their friends that suddenly does something and you need to fight them. One example, I've designed an encounter for my future campaign where one NPC dies and then the partner just goes grief struck and starts destroying stuff, and then the characters need to go and stop her. And there's the conflict of they need to save the people of the villages that are being currently destroyed. They don't quite want to fight this person because they know that first of all it's grief, and the characters are also experiencing the grief from the NPC death. The NPC is close to all of my characters, PCs I mean. And then there's just the emotional whole aspect of it. It creates drama and conflict, and that's what can really create a good and memorable encounter.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now I'm running a campaign. There are no players, yeah. I'm running a campaign. It's the enemy within campaign, and that doesn't really matter. But the setting was that the PCs basically came to this this tower. They have been before. They helped to build it. They left. Now they came back. They didn't expect there to be anyone there. Then they were like greeted by someone, and I was, oh, okay. Are you the new people kind of running the show here? That yes, okay. Then they wanted to go in because basically they knew that there's some hidden chambers there. They want to get there. And now the PCs are looking very suspicious to the NPCs. Like, we came to this, it's not an island, but basically we came to this island, to this tower where there should be no one. There's no reason to come here. We say that we are workers, but we are equipped like fighters, and we would like to come in. So, okay, they're told, okay, leave your equipment here, and you can then come in and let's see then what to do. They go in, and then inside the building, there's someone who recognizes them. That those dudes, again, they must have been following me. And he says to the basically to the people who are running the show in the tower in that moment, that I arrest these guys, that I need to find out why are they following me. And the players are now uncertain. From the beginning, they are uncertain. They have no idea. Are these good guys, bad guys, neutral guys? They don't really want to leave their equipment anywhere. Now there's a reason why the NPCs, so the people who are now running the place, want to basically arrest, so basically contain the PCs. So there's a conflict. The PCs definitely don't want to be kind of like arrested, tied up, and so on, be helpless. How far do they go in resisting? One of the players, one of the PCs has a mental state, so let's call it an insanity, which makes them think that everything's kind of like as bad as it could be. So everyone is kind of culprit. Everyone is some kind of cultist. So they are really, really, really now convinced that this is some kind of a ruse. That they're trying to basically get us unequipped so they can kill us. So he's ready to fight even with swords, not to be arrested. The rest of the PCs are like, I don't know what's going on. Should I fight those guys? Should I be fighting our own guy? Should I give my weapon away, or should I be holding my weapon? They have no idea. And all this came from the narrative, from the starting point, what they had done long ago in the campaign, how they arrived to there, now, why they arrived to there. How does it look from different points of view, different characters in the same scene? How does the situation look for them? And the players realize that, oh shit, this actually looks pretty bad for us. We look like the bad guys here. So they kind of like, they want to like give in, like, okay, I understand this looks bad. I am not the bad guy, so I give away the weapons. But on the other hand, you might be the bad guy, so I'm definitely not going to do that. The point being, it all came, but because we followed logically the narrative. We're now right in the beginning, like we're kind of like still a bit uncertain. It was just last session when this happened, whether there's going to be a fight or not. For the rest of the PCs, one of them already started to fight.
The insane guy?
What?
The insane guy?
Yes.
Okay.
And of course, actually, it looks extra bad now because now he successfully murdered one of the other NPCs who are now running the tower. So it's looking really, really bad now for the other pieces. Like they know, like, okay, shit, if we don't fight, we're definitely gonna be arrested for if for nothing else, then at least for that. But on the other hand, we should protect our guy. What should we do? Think about how does this encounter differ from other encounters. If your campaign is about going, there's some orc invasion. Orcs are coming. You need to go and get the war chief. Then they will leave. How do you have that campaign against the orcs without having another combat against the same orcs again and again and again and again? It's gonna get repetitive and boring very fast. Think about that. So when you, again, like I said earlier, when you create a scene, you should have a reason for that scene. What is the purpose of this scene? Why do you have it? And then build on that. If they do have combat, how is it different? Is the environment the key here? Are these different kinds of orcs? Is there some kind of extra agenda? Do you want to give the players a different agenda here? Or do the orcs have a different agenda? But don't repeat the same scene after another. The enemy, unless it's some kind of a boss or otherwise very special creation, if it's like an orc again, the PCs in certain settings at least, they have been fighting against orcs. It's a very common thing. The players, if they come through that normal D&D progression from the level 1, they probably had at some point these orcs that they had to fight against. They're usually not the most important thing or most interesting thing, the special thing about this. So what is it? Is it the environment? Is it the agenda? Is there some kind of a special thing, magical thing going around that changes the rules, not just the game rules, but of course the narrative, in the rules in the narration is somehow dangerous. We have stormy weather here. You have to consider about how is this interesting. Again, if it's a movie, do you have the same scene again and again and again and again? You have different kinds of scenes. Same thing here. Raise your hand if you know what this is. Yep. Almost everyone. And probably the rest weren't listening. Beholder is so well known that even people who have never played D&D recognize it. There's a problem, or it's not a problem, but it is creating an extra challenge when the players know more than the PCs do. Especially if it happens to be combat, and especially if it happens to be about the strengths, weaknesses, and tactics of the opponent. When the players know it, most players will just subconsciously start to utilize that. Then there are those players who realize that they know more, and then they start to balance how much of this information can I use, what is logical for the PC, and it just gives them a struggle. And then there are those people who, because of this struggle, they are afraid to use any of that information because they're afraid that they're kind of like a metagaming in that moment. So one good approach, well, actually, it solves this problem, but it also does a lot of other things, is to provide them challenges, or in this case monsters, that they don't recognize. The players don't have a clue what's going on. They have to follow what you, just react to what you're telling them in that moment. What can I see? What can I hear? How does this monster react to my attacks when I shoot an arrow at it? What about a firebolt? What about this and that and whatever? If I move here, it doesn't seem to see me. Can it see? How does it perceive? They have to actually be in that moment. And you can do this in the simplest form by just giving skin. You can have exactly the same monster what you had, from a monster manual, for example. Just make it look different. They don't recognize it. The players don't recognize it. They don't know what it is. If the PCs don't know what it is, the players don't need to know what it is. And this simple thing will help. But of course, you're not at all limited to leaving it at that. Make it a action-based monster simultaneously. Make it different. It will also start to feel different, more exciting, when it can do more and more interesting things that are still tied to what it's supposed to be about. Beholder is all about those eyes. Make those eyes special. Make them more special than what they have managed to do in the monster manual.
Good point out that. Why would every single adventurer be able to know every single monster that is in the monster manual? Why would they know about Beholder if they are just starting out with one as well?
Yeah, this is just an example because people know Beholder. But it applies to every setting. Just the same. Surprise them. One of the most interesting, based on the feedback that I've gotten from players, one of the most interesting combats they've ever been in was when they were basically rummaging through a magical place, and then they just opened, again, kicking the door, and they saw it's more of an arena, and then there's this blob there, and they can see that it's kind of moving, so it's probably not just waste. And at that point, players have no idea what's going on. They remember that they don't remember a way to move forward elsewhere either, so they can see that there's a door on the other side. What should we do? Well, let's go first check. I'm a bit worried about that blob because I don't know what it does. So I go away, and then they come back later. Okay, we have to move on the other side of the blob. Let's try to be shh. Maybe it can't hear. I don't see any ears. And that's how basically what it started to be about. The players started to investigate the monster. What is it about? What can it do? How does it react to things? When combat erupted, they were attacking it. I was describing that, you can literally see that the flesh is being cut, but it doesn't seem to be bothered by it. As simple as that is the description of resistance. You're dealing damage, but it doesn't really care. And then someone deals literally a falcon punch to it as a paladin, smiting it heavily, and they hit it to the central with such force that like a big blob of it just exploded out of its back and launched 10-15 feet away. And then you have two blobs there, and they're like, woohoo! Finally, we clearly did damage to this guy. They're happy. And then both of those blobs get up. And they're like, shit, I have no idea if I just made things worse. Surprise your players. Then, totally different kind of topic. Some random things that I happen to come up with all the time in different places and forums. And in the roleplay context, of course. Very common question is, can I X? Can I do this? Can I change something? I don't like that. Can an NPC have this and this ability? Can something? There is no police coming to arrest you if you happen to be playing, for example, D&D differently than what it is written in the book. or for you to decide to change your setting outside how it's written in some source books. Your job, your goal is to have fun. Anything that helps you to have fun is something you should do. If it increases your fun factor as a group, and make sure first that you are aligned, that your group is trying to do the same thing. Whatever helps you have fun, do that. That's your answer. Can I? Yes, if it increases your fun. And if no, then don't do that. You're just hurting yourself. And it's incredible how often this comes up. Aligning expectations, and this is super common in different forums and different sites. Well, I've been saying this long time. In my opinion, the best way to roleplay is not to see it, is not any specific way how people play it. It's to see what it can be. Understanding this is role-playing. Just the more you can introduce, the more you can use of that, the better. Focus on what makes role-playing different from other mediums, different games, different things you can spend your time with, and highlight that, because that's how the role-playing experience is going to feel more special compared to the other activities. Don't do the same thing that you already are doing with other activities. Focus on the different things that those other activities don't give you. But there's nothing wrong with seeing it as a board game, but still, how does this board game differ from the other board games? See the big picture, the forest. A lot of the questions actually have nothing to do with role-playing. The questions are about people. They're in short, they're usually about, I have this player who is causing problems, or I have this group that is causing problems, or I have this GM who is causing problems. And then they just see it from some specific question point of view. Role-playing is not special in that sense that it's an interaction between people. Always when you have a problem, when you role-play in the group, if you have a problem in the group, the first question is to ask, are you aligned? If yes, then ask yourself, how would you solve the same problem at work? How would you solve the same problem with your partner? How would you solve the same problem with your child? Role-playing is not special in that sense. It's about people interacting with people. And very common issue, let's go one step back first. When VTTs became very common, the funniest question or look for help that I had was someone was asking, how can I basically prevent players from drawing on my maps? And there's no such feature. Why do you need such feature? Because they just keep drawing on the maps and usually dig pictures. And it's like, what would you do if you were playing face-to-face and they would just start to draw on your grid pictures, preventing you from playing? What would you do? How would that change the situation that you came from VTT to the physical room and the physical grid? What would boom, they had an answer. They saw the VTT environment somehow completely different. The same happens with role-playing often. They see the role-playing environment somehow completely different from other contexts. It's not. How would you solve the same problem outside role-playing? That's in my last slide. Any questions or comments?
I have to write this down because I forget so easily. But about the expectation aligning, do you have
We have
No
questions or comments.
Okay. Sori, mulle kerrotte, että 3 asti.
Eikö me aloitetaan 3, meidän pitää.
Okei.
Varttivana loppuun. Sori, tää pitäisi olla runneri kertomassa. Sori, että